Hello and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day, and on this episode, I'm joined by Andy Schectman, an expert in the gold and silver space and the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. We're going to discuss President Trump's hard stance on the BRICS nations and their desire to circumvent the US dollar. The officially stated gold reserves in America. Is the metal really there? We're going to talk the Biden administration ramping up aggression towards Russia. How will that end? And so much more. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Andy Schectman. So we've discussed the BRICS a lot on this show, me and you together, and the potential for a gold-backed currency or some alternate currency that could replace or at least run alongside the US dollar at some point. And apparently President Trump is having none of that. I'd like to read one of his recent tweets. I'm sure you've seen it. He said, "The idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs." So what are your thoughts here? Is this posturing? Is this idle threats? Do you think he could actually back it up? And if he did, what would the consequences be?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's overplaying his hand. I think it would be enough of a reason, I think, or a accentuation of all of the reasons that brought these countries together. It's only more of the same, and you can't force other countries to take your currency, especially when it has been mismanaged the way that ours has, creating $100,000 worth of debt per second, 24/7, using these types of sanctions and threats of tariffs to bully people into taking it, or countries into taking it. It's a mistake. In fact, I think it only strengthens the resolve of the countries standing behind it. Is it a bluff? I don't know. And then on the other hand, in 2016, he did an interview, Trump did, where he mentioned, look, it would be wonderful, he said, to go back to a gold standard, although he acknowledged that there would be substantial challenges. And of course, we talk about Judy Shelton. She's known for not only her advocacy of the gold standard, but also she's been very vocal recently about issuing treasury bonds with a lower coupon rate, but then yet redeemable in gold down the road, to give demand to a treasury market that is certainly losing popularity and demand. And of course, Scott Bessent, the treasury secretary, his new nominee, has come out and publicly said that gold is his biggest holding. He is also an advocate for injecting, I think you could say, sound money into the system. So on one hand, I think there's evidence that he's thought about tying, to some degree, our system to gold, although we haven't heard much about it recently. There have, been rumblings of it really since 2016. On the other hand, I think it's overplaying his card. I think it's a mistake to go around threatening. This is not how you reestablish confidence. This is not how you rekindle relationships that have been bruised and battered over the last 4 years. I think it's the wrong move. And if I had to guess, more posturing than anything, Jesse.
Hey guys, just a quick break to hear from today's sponsor, ARC Silver Gold Osmium. They offer personalized service and competitive prices with no minimum purchase for silver, gold, platinum, or osmium. Here's just some of the comments left on this YouTube channel about ARC SGO and owner Ian Everard. Have bought from ARC, good source and price. I cannot say enough good about Ian and his company. He is the most honest individual I could find in order to buy precious metals. If you are looking to buy precious metals, I recommend Ian at ARC Silver. He is a straight shooter. So go to arcsgo.com and contact Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And when it comes to the official gold reserves that the US holds, on record, It's the largest in the world by a massive margin at over 8,000 tons. There are some who think that gold might not really be there, kind of the opposite of China, where China's stated reserves, a lot of people believe that they actually have much more than that. A lot of people believe that the American reserves are not fully audited and that nobody knows exactly what's there. What are your thoughts there on the gold? Does the U.S. have 8,000 tons? And if so, that's a massive advantage, especially if you talk about the potential of returning to a gold standard to have those type of reserves. What are your thoughts?
It's suspicious that it hasn't been audited. The gold stock hasn't really been audited since the 50s. Ron Paul has floated bills over the years to audit Fort Knox, and they were turned down. Transparency is what creates trust and confidence. The lack of transparency creates suspicion. When we talk about China, look, my whole career, Jesse, people would say the numbers that they are telling us in terms of their gold holdings are crap, that they were stuck at around 1,200 metric tons for years and years, and they were never updated. They are the largest producer of gold in the world, i.e., that they just found this huge stash. But they're the largest producer in the world, and they've been producing between 300 and 500 metric tons a year for years. That's not reflective of the numbers that they tell us, 23, 24, 2,500 metric tons. Now that's not right, not even remotely. Not only that, they're the largest producer and importer in the world. They have been flying around in interviews I've done with Sean Kuhn of Dolly Varden. They've been flying around the world buying doré and concentrate in both silver and gold from miners directly, disintermediating the commercial banks, disintermediating the market. They buy the concentrate and the doré, which are crudely refined bars, before they go to the refineries to be further refined, and bringing them home to China to further refine it. They're taking delivery off of the world's exchanges left and right. And then they tell the world that they've stopped buying gold for a few months, and everyone reacts like it's the craziest thing in the world. Yet they're lying about it because the import-export numbers tell a different story. Not to mention when they purchase gold through the or through the People's Liberation Army. So the PBOC, when it purchases it directly, it's supposed to report it to the IMF. But if it's purchased by the PLA or a proxy bank, a commercial bank, or a sovereign wealth fund on behalf of the PBOC, none of these things are reported. If they purchase gold that is under the 999 purity, they don't have to report that either. So they buy the doré and the concentrate from the miners and bring it home and refine it themselves. They're the largest producer, accumulator of gold in the world. Alistair MacLeod 2 years ago was saying he believed they had 38,000 metric tons, 5 times what we do, 18,000 by the people, 20 by the state. They've been telling their people for years to buy gold and incentivizing them to do so. So my guess is that, let's just pretend that the West has all the gold they say they do. There's just giant IOU stickers on top of the bars. I don't know. It's annoying to me that they would be anything less than transparent, and I think it signals to the world that again, more, it's just it lacks trust. And then you look at the Chinese, and it's the opposite. But in a world that is moving in this direction, the last thing you would ever want to do is tell people how much you have and how much you're accumulating, as it would the trade would be crowded out. Everyone would run to accumulate it. So I guess what I'm really getting at is that I truly believe China has way more than anyone in the world, far more than we do, and it would be in their best interest to keep that close to the vest. And by the same token, if you believe the guys at GATA, like I do, they would tell you that the majority of the gold that the West has claimed to have has been leased out, pledged out, sold to keep the prices down for years and years and years. And if not, then just why not appease the people who are saying, why won't you do an audit, and just open it up to be audited? It is the gold of the American public, so just audit it. And anything short of that doesn't inspire confidence, and I think that's a bad thing.
And conversely, up north where I'm from in Canada, they have zero stated gold reserves. Hilariously, apparently, Trump recently told Justin Trudeau that they could become a state of the U.S. if things didn't go well and he could be the governor. I found that quite amusing. But the underpinning that fact that they have zero gold reserves in Canada, in the case of a monetary reset, in the case of, either the world or certain nations going back onto a gold standard, in the case of hyperinflation or any of these things that could lead people back to sound money, where does that leave Canada in that situation?
Well, they have probably more gold in the ground than most other countries do. So, I mean, at least they have the ability to, pull it out of the ground. It was a very strange decision for sure. But I guess what would happen would be immediate nationalization of their mines and of their own minerals. Um, I think that would be a foregone conclusion. And it's funny because most people would tell you to buy North American mining projects because you have the a much lesser chance of having any type of move like that where the government comes in and nationalizes, and which I think is a trend that you could see around the world, of course. But yeah, what does it do for Canada? It puts them massively behind the eight ball, but at least they have the ability to nationalize their own properties within their own borders and would probably, in the end, fare better than a lot of other countries because they have access to it. Not only that, they have much of the infrastructure already in place to pull the metal out of the ground. So you then look at the Royal Canadian Mint, they're one of the main refinery hubs in the world. So they would have the ability to do it. It might just put them behind the eight ball for a little bit.
Trump has campaigned, going back to President Trump and the whole question of America's gold reserves, he's campaigned on being more of a pro-crypto president, talking about, appearing at Bitcoin conferences and talking about how no one's going to take your Bitcoin. There's talk of a potential Bitcoin reserve being established. We're seeing a bit of a mania right now in crypto once again, with Bitcoin almost approaching $100,000. Hilariously, Dogecoin, which is a completely useless coin, even stated so by the people who made it, its market cap very recently, I don't know if it's still there, is bigger than every uranium mining company combined, which is absolutely mind-blowing. I'm wondering if you think that we will eventually see a collapse of that sector in some form or another, and if to any degree could crypto be eating gold's lunch in terms of there's a certain generation of investor that is now looking to Bitcoin as sound money as opposed to gold or silver?
I mean, to a degree, yeah, it's certainly detracting from gold's appeal. I find it interesting that all you hear is crypto. Um, And at the same time, you find that the central banks are accumulating hard assets, not so much in the way of crypto. It's also interesting to note that if you look at the main trading pair on majority of the platforms like Kraken and Coinbase, it's USDT tether with Bitcoin, and if you look at USDT and USDC, these dollar-based stable coins, the majority of their holdings are in US treasuries. And so it's interesting. It's as if, on one hand, people are trying to reject the legacy system, the old time system, and go into crypto. And at the same time, in many respects, they're actually supporting and extending the life of the bond market as much of the world is shedding our treasuries. It's the backing of many of these stable coins, USDC and USDT in particular, that is actually extending the life of the crypto market. Yeah, I mean, instant gratification, Jesse, evidently is not fast enough for most people. And there's this get rich gambling mentality on things like Dogecoin. And they have made people wealthy. They have indeed. But I find it interesting that in the end, we see the central banks buying gold hand over fist, and yet the impetus here with the public is into cryptocurrency. When you look at, you mentioned Trump going to the Bitcoin show in Tennessee. He did. And what I find also interesting about that is directly after he spoke was Senator Loomis, Cynthia Loomis from Wyoming, whose proposal to fund that Bitcoin account was to revalue the gold held by the Federal Reserve on behalf of the Treasury to a level sufficient enough to use some of the proceeds to buy that Bitcoin. And so, here again, yeah, I think the Trump trade is very bullish for crypto. I think that it's becoming almost a segue into a digital world, a world that is a world filled with surveillance, a world filled with lack of privacy. People are becoming more and more and more accustomed to these digital forms of wealth. And ultimately, where does that lead to? It's almost like a stepping stone, if you will. It's just becoming more mainstream. Yet at the same time, you look at what every central bank on the planet has been accumulating, and it hasn't been cryptocurrencies. I'm sure there are some that have. It's been hard commodities like precious metals. So, you hope it doesn't end poorly. You hope it doesn't end badly. But indeed, yeah, you have a generation of people who have put their faith in these digital assets and largely have done well. But in the end, I don't know how this all plays out. For me, I don't discount Bitcoin. I think there is certainly, you can see that the powers that be are pushing us in that direction. And rather than fight it, I think, yeah, you could certainly make some money by being in these asset classes. But in the end, for me, you take some of that profit and you pull it off the table and you put it into gold, you put it into silver, because as much as the media, as much as the information, as much as the rhetoric is pointing in that direction, don't look so much upon what they say, but what they are doing. And the most well-informed and well-funded money on the planet, their choice has been gold over Bitcoin, whereas the public's choice has been Bitcoin over gold. In the end, I guess we'll see who wins this one and who's right and who's wrong. And it doesn't have to be an either or, but for me, yeah, it's certainly something that is difficult to ignore. I see it, but in the end, I feel more comfortable with physical assets in my possession. I mean, look at Bill Gates as an example, buying up all the farmland. I think it's tangibles in your possession, and I'm not throwing dirt on Bitcoin. I happen to think it's turning into something that is becoming far more viable than I ever thought it would be. I own a little bit of it. I accumulate a little bit of it. But in the end, it does not replace gold. And I think the central banks are showing you that.
And how do you feel about the tokenization of precious metals? Do you think that could serve as kind of bridging the gap between crypto and precious metals? Or do you view that as kind of a trap in terms of, there's some apps out there already and they claim that all the gold is fully audited, stored in vaults around the world, and that can be totally certified. But of course, the old gold bug adage of you don't hold it, you don't own it comes to mind. How do you view that sort of digitization of the precious metals market?
Well, they're tokenizing everything. That's what I mean. This surveillance world where, it's everything is becoming on the ledger. That is disturbing to me. I do think that's one of the benefits that is not talked about enough. The old adage, you don't hold it, you don't own it. There's truth to that. And in a world that's becoming increasingly digital, I don't know, I think there's a lot to be said for having it in your own possession, being off the grid, owning things that only you know that you own physically. And I think that's kind of the misconception, if you will, about cryptocurrencies, is that everyone thinks that you have such great anonymity. The off ramps will not allow that. When you come off the platform and move into tangibles, move into real items, sell it to buy other things, that loss of privacy is completely and totally gone. Now, I know that isn't what your question was, but I do think that I think that this is a trend, if you will, that we will we will see increase as more and more and more things become tokenized, get on a ledger, become, you know, become something that erodes all of your privacy. And you end up being in a world where there is no privacy, there is no anonymity. Everything is digitized and everything is moving in this surveillance state type of world. And does it ultimately move to the issuance of a central bank digital currency? Certainly the Federal Reserve would like that. Is that what this is? You know, I mean, is it the slow acceptance of everything being digitized, everything being tokenized? It's kind of what it feels like to me. And, you know, I guess I'll go into that era kicking and screaming, hanging on to things that are, you know, I guess you could say still old school and off the ledger and in my own possession. But, you know, look, if that's the only way you're going to own gold and silver, okay, fine, I get it. But to me, um, there is no substitute for owning it physically in your own possession, that no one in the world knows that you own it.
I want to shift to geopolitics for a moment and discuss the escalation involving Russia, Ukraine, the Biden administration giving Ukraine their blessing and most likely their satellite data as well to allow missile strikes into Russian territory. There are even talks out there about giving Ukraine nuclear weapons right now. In your view, why are these politicians so hell-bent on pushing for a full-blown world war and potential nuclear devastation?
Well, I can tell you that their motivation has nothing to do for a genuine concern for Ukraine's sovereignty. It's I don't know. It's maybe one of the dumber things I've ever seen, that we were involved to this degree, spending, you know, a couple $100 billion um, defending the Ukraine and going as far as providing long-range missiles, even speaking nuclear, that are being fired into Russia. I would think Putin understands this, understands that he's being goaded, and hopefully has a speed dial number right to Trump's phone, resisting the temptation to drag us into World War III, God forbid. But I want to read something to you that I recently came across and just blows me away. This was just the other night, where Lindsey Graham was talking on Sean Hannity's show. And let me just read this to you. Last week in a Fox News appearance, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham said outright that the war in the Ukraine is about money. Namely, Graham told Fox News host Sean Hannity that the U.S. stands to financially gain from Ukraine's vast agricultural sector and $2 to $7 trillion worth of rare earth minerals, alike in a prospective wartime deal with the war-torn, albeit resource-wealthy nation. This war is about money. People don't talk about much about it, but you know, the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals is Ukraine. $2 to $7 trillion worth of minerals that are rare earth minerals, very relevant to the 21st century, Graham declared. Ukraine's ready to do a deal with us, not the Russians. So it's in our interest to make sure the Russians don't take over that place. Ukraine is the breadbasket of the developing world, Graham must. 50% of all the food going to Africa comes from Ukraine. Graham also emphasized that the incoming Trump administration is uniquely positioned to cash out on such resources. Donald Trump is going to do a deal to get our money back, to enrich ourselves with rare earth minerals. A good deal for the Ukraine and us, Graham said. He's going to bring peace. It's so full of shit, it's just ridiculous. A good deal for the Ukraine. How many of their people have died needlessly? This is just a push for, you know, a land grab, a resource grab, and at the same time to keep their eyes, you know, on Russia. And it's just ridiculous. You know, we invade Iraq under false pretenses, and we have our eye on Iran, and get to exploit the natural resources of Iraq. Same thing here, and it's the same crap over and over and over again. It is less about the sovereignty of the Ukraine and more about exploitation. This is the reason these countries around the world are finding safety in numbers against the West. It's this type of behavior. It's this type of rhetoric. And Lindsey Graham is a fool for saying it out loud, what most of us already knew. But That's what this is all about, Jesse. It's not about protecting the sovereignty of the Ukraine. It's a proxy war, and it's a war to go in and pillage another country's natural resources for the West and get our money back, as they say, as the military-industrial complex has been massively enriched for the last several years, and it's just complete and total lunacy.
Well, while we're on the topic of Ukraine, what are your thoughts on President Biden pardoning his son Hunter Biden? And interestingly, that pardon going back to 2014, a lot of people making the connection that that's when Hunter started doing business in Ukraine, business that allegedly involves a lot of corruption. It's funny because Biden specifically said, "I will not pardon my son." Several media outlets echoed that sentiment. I mean, very fascinating development. How do you see that? What are your thoughts?
It's pathetic. I mean, here it is again. It's everything this administration. It's emblematic of everything this administration has done and said. It's all a bunch of crap. It's all a bunch of lies. And the craziest part about it all is how divisive this administration has been. Where I would venture to say that they put a spin on this on the left-leaning media that make it look like poor Hunter and this was the right thing to do. And it not only that, it pardons it out into the future. Most of the time, these types of pardons are made as they're walking out the door, not with plenty of time leading up to his removal. I mean, he's still got another 40 plus days before he's out of office. Why did he do it now instead of as he's walking out the door? It's pathetic and it's disgusting. And everyone on the left has beaten up Trump for so many stupid reasons. And yet you see stuff like this and he gets a pass. The Biden family they're criminals and it's just obvious. And he's a liar. He looked the American people in the face on that ABC News interview. I remember it well. Are you going to pardon your son? No. Are you going to stand by what the juries say in his trial? Yes. Then he lied and, lied in a very material way to protect himself, his legacy. It's just gross, Jesse, and I can't wait fast enough to say good riddance to the Biden administration. And Trump has every right, as far as I'm concerned, just to go after these people who have gone after him, and yet the media is like he's going to go after everyone and be vengeful, and this is not what we need, but it's what they've done. And then at the very end, after they call it Russian disinformation and they lie and they say it's all a bunch of nonsense, we find out no, actually it was true, and we're going to pardon Hunter. And the cocaine they found in the White House, well, that was obviously Hunter's too. I mean, the whole thing is deep and dark and gross. And this current administration has done more to damage this country internally and externally than any external foe ever could have done, ever. And this is just another piece of it. I find it to be as distasteful as anything I've ever seen in politics.
So with all this geopolitical uncertainty we're seeing around the world, conflicts, Russia, Ukraine, we've got the Middle East conflict going on, ceasefire supposedly called between Israel and Lebanon, but then there's some reports that Israel is continuing to attack, etc. I mean, I don't choose sides. My comment section gets very upset when it comes to whether one side or the other is being accused. I just think it's all kind of insanity and it needs to stop. But at the moment, gold's role as a safe haven asset seems obvious. If we do see further escalation, do you expect that to reflect in the gold price? And conversely, if cooler heads prevail and we start seeing peace negotiated with these various conflicts, would that ultimately be bearish for gold moving forward?
Yeah, there's the war premium. I get it. I think gold and silver will move up independently of these geopolitical conflicts. Certainly, there's always that added reason to own gold in the face of geopolitical conflict. But if you look throughout the years, very often when a war breaks out, they hit the price of gold. That the commercial banks will short the price to delink the rationale people would have for fleeing currency and moving into commodities. It's been doing that forever and ever and ever. So I don't look at that as being as big of a driver as much as the inflation lowered interest rates, the weaker dollar, tariffs. These are all highly inflationary, and inflation is not going anywhere. In fact, it will be reignited under the Trump administration in many ways. So, they may use that as an excuse to cover more shorts to knock the price down. Ultimately, I don't think it has much bearing at all, to be honest with you.
Now, we spoke about increased surveillance earlier. It's interesting in that some of the things that you've said so far about the Biden administration, etc., in some cases, you could be jailed in places like Germany for that, and the UK as well. Now, I've spoken to many people who say that that is happening. I mean, I should also mention in Australia, they're now pushing through a law where people 16 years and younger are banned from using social media. And to enforce that, it looks like they're going to require facial scans from everybody and to have access to all of that data, because you have to prove that you're not 16 to get online, even if you are above that age. It seems extremely draconian. I mean, it should also be noted that during the pandemic, Australia had some of the world's most strict restrictions, and the citizens put up with it. So I think it's no surprise that the politicians are pushing for more. But some people are saying that this is kind of like a cornered animal that's losing its power, that's dying. And whenever governments start to lose their power, they become authoritarian. Do you see that as the reality when it comes to these various countries in Europe? And how do you feel about the way things are moving in the US in regards to that? Has a Trump presidency, is that a positive thing for personal freedom and more of a higher percentage chance that we'll see an exit from this sort of surveillance state scenario?
Well, I don't know about the surveillance state, because moving towards a digital world and moving towards, tokenization and digitization of everything inherently is more surveyable, right? I mean, moving towards a cashless society is surveillance in and of itself. I do think that he's surrounding himself with people who will go back to embracing free speech and the First Amendment. I found the cancel culture and the censorship more distressing than anything over the last several years. And certainly it appears as though he will back away from that. And it's concerning to see these other countries, like you mentioned, the UK, Germany, and Australia, imposing these draconian style of rules that, they're almost Black Mirror, they're dystopian. So at least I think in this country, they're saying the right things to move away from that. But here again, it's silently pushing people into a digital world, into a tokenized world, into a world where everything your everything that we do now is digital. And if we cross that Rubicon, there are two things that I would really want to stay away from. One would be this digital ID that they will probably roll out in the name of election integrity. That's all the biometrics. And if you look at all of the patents Bill Gates has that mesh the digital ID with your health records, your financial records, he's got Visa, all of these. Nomi Prince did an amazing interview, or guess you could say like an expose on it about a year ago, meshing the patents that Gates has with the digital ID and the future. And I think that we're moving in that direction quietly, and they'll keep it quiet by bringing back the ability to say what you want to say and no more censorship and that kind of stuff, while at the same time moving us towards this tokenized digital surveillance world. So on one hand, it's good. We're going to get our ability to say things again back, hopefully, and won't be censored and kicked off of platforms for having the nerve to say the name of a virus or the president's son's name. I mean, that's how we had to do things. You could never say what kind of virus it was, and you could never, ever say Hunter Biden. I mean, that was the worst thing you could do if you wanted to get your channel taken down or deplatformed. But on the other hand, I still believe that the agenda is to move us towards a digital world, a tokenized world, a world that will be surveilled. And that is where we're going. I mean, you look at the CBDCs, whether or not we get it under this administration, if you take the world's GDP and the countries that comprise all of it, 99% of the countries that comprise the world's GDP have a CBDC in development or already operational. And I think the plan all along was to bring Lael Brainerd in, that she would have been the head of the Federal Reserve had Kamala won. She is a modern monetary theorist. She did develop the CBDC with MIT. She did run point for FedNow, which is Venmo and Zelle on steroids backed by the Fed, and it didn't work. Well, Trump won, but does that mean that we are not going to move towards a CBDC? Does that mean we are not going to move towards a new system? Is there not going to be a reset that will then reset the entire system and then move towards something more digital? I don't know. I've always felt that ultimately was where we were going, that they would do all they could. And that's why I coined the phrase too stupid to be stupid. So many of the things that we've seen over the last few years literally are too stupid to be stupid. I was doing an interview with Tom Luongo yesterday, and he was saying basically this is a British and a Davos has been psyop to, literally destabilize the United States, bring it down, bankrupt it, and destroy it from within. And he has his reasons for saying that. I won't go into that long, lengthy diatribe, but simply to say he believed that, yeah, it is too stupid to be stupid, and this was the plan all along, and was ultimately to get rid of Jerome Powell and install Lael Brainerd, this modern monetary theorist, and it didn't work out. But I do think that there's something to be said for that. The worst thing that I think we could do would be to take this digital ID. Let's hope we move away from it. But if not, if everyone starts taking the digital ID under the name of, for example, election integrity, we have to be able to, make sure it's you, because there was a big deal about all these people that were allowed to vote without providing any ID. In fact, Gavin Newsom made it a law illegal to ask people for ID. How horrible. To ask people for ID to vote, right? You have to show you're 17 to go to an R-rated movie, but God forbid we ask you to show it's really you to vote. Well, no, that's discrimination. Well, and that really pissed a lot of people off. And so maybe that's kind of the backdoor plan. Yeah, take this and our elections will be fair forever. Well, I mean, they were fair forever before 2016, where there were questions whether or not it was fair or not, or 2020 rather. Probably 2016 too. There were people saying it wasn't fair. I mean, look, that's what we're going to probably see is some sort of a digital ID, and that is moving towards that type of place where you're surveilled, period. And I don't think there's any way around that, to be honest with you. But at least we'll get our ability to speak freely back under this current administration. At least that's the way it appears.
I want to get your thoughts on the world's largest gold deposit being discovered in China. Now, at least according to Chinese state media, this is a quote from Yahoo, valued at approximately 600 billion yuan or 83 billion US dollars. The discovery could be considered the largest and most lucrative reservoir of gold ever uncovered. Now, obviously, it's one thing to find gold in the ground, another to extract it economically, but still appears to be a boon for a nation that on record has the sixth largest gold reserve, but as you were speaking about earlier, could be much more than that. What are your thoughts on this discovery and just the direction that China's going with its gold reserves? It's also encouraging citizens to purchase gold. I've heard some people say that the Chinese government can actually use the people's gold as part of its own reserves, because it can then seize that at any point or tell them you have to turn it in for the greater good. You've touched on the China gold story. Expand on it for us in regards to them finding this reserve and also the direction they're putting their citizens in terms of encouraging them to accumulate physical gold as well.
Well, that's what Alistair said all along, that, they got nearly 40,000 metric tons, and they would, if need be, find a way to siphon that from the public. However they do it, by incentive or by force, I don't know. That's debatable. They've been mining gold uneconomically for years and years and years using our trade imbalance. And I don't discount it at all. How many people understand that they're the second largest producer of silver in the world? You never hear that. David Morgan will tell you they told him, whoever they are, the Chinese officials in the mining sector, that they're number one in the world. Yeah, I do believe it. And maybe, if you wanted to play, and this is putting on my tinfoil hat, maybe they didn't find it. Maybe they said they did, and they're going to look like they're mining this area because they have far more gold than they've ever let on to believe. Oh, look, now we just added all this gold to our coffers. We just found this big stash. They haven't been updating their numbers for a very long time, and they have way more than they tell us. They're not the sixth. They're probably way, way, way ahead of us in terms of, and it's funny because, we take them at face value and we take the US at face value, but the US is every bit as opaque as China is. In fact, maybe even more so. Why would our holdings not be audited since 53? Why? And turned down repetitively. And why did it take so many years for Germany's gold to be returned to them? It should have just been an easy, put it on a couple of airplanes and off you go. The whole thing is very opaque, and it doesn't serve anyone in terms of a system moving perhaps towards something tied to a commodity-backed new system. You look at the BRICS currency that they have proposed, the unit, 40% gold backed. Again, you look at Judy Shelton talking about attaching gold to a system. If you don't, who's going to want to buy our treasuries of any duration? You look at Scott Bessent, it's his largest holding. We're seeing rumblings of gold throughout the system. You have Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, saying any CBDC not pegged to something would be fiat. You have gold reclassified, the only other tier one asset in the world. So to me, gold is going to have a place in all of this, tying it to a system. That's the marriage between digital CBDC and gold, using that blockchain to show the veracity and the immutability. I've always felt that was the path. And if that is the path, then you don't want to tell anyone how much you're accumulating. Doesn't do you any good. It just crowds you out of your trade. You do it very stealth. And they're using the suppression of the Western paper market to do this, to siphon off everything they can. It doesn't do them any good to be forthright about it. So yeah, I think indeed the Chinese have way more than they let on to, and they are telling their citizens to do it. And if they ever did get into a position where they needed that gold to back a new system, whether it be by force or incentive, they would take it. And you know, highly probable. So I don't discount any of that. And whether or not they found it, and they really did find it, and they will mine it, you can bet your bottom dollar they will. Or they didn't find it, and they're telling us they found it as a means to immediately say that their stockpile went from here to here. These are all, I guess, possibilities. But yeah, China and gold should be synonymous by now. And if not, for most people, you're not paying close enough attention.
Well, Andy, this has been a fantastic conversation. We are going to be back in just a couple days for part 2 of this interview to focus on the silver market. But for now, tell us about Miles Franklin Precious Metals and where people can find that.
They can simply go to milesfranklin.com if they would like to get prices. Our prices on our price list that you would request at info@milesfranklin.com will be as good or better than anywhere in North America. We keep that close to the vest for a myriad of reasons. But just send us an email, info@milesfranklin, request our price list or any questions. Let us know that you heard about us on this podcast. It's just for our own record keeping, and we'll make it a good experience. We've been doing this, be 35 years in February. We've never had a customer complaint. And we just crossed over the $11 billion sales mark without having a complaint in 35 years, something we're really proud of. So give us a shot, request our price sheet, no obligation for that. Ask questions. If you do so and don't get something back within a few hours, check your spam. Sometimes those emails will go to spam, but it will be worth your time, I assure you. We also do have a new YouTube channel that I'd like to have you on, Jesse. We've grown to over 29,000 subscribers in just a few months, which is pretty mind-blowing to me. And but that's little by little on YouTube, and I always love coming on your show, man. Thanks for having me. I do appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. I'll put a link to Miles Franklin as well as the email and the YouTube channel. It has been amazing to watch your growth there. You've had some great guests, and you've got great skills as an interviewer as well. I look forward to seeing you in just a couple days for part 2.
Likewise. Thanks, buddy.
And thank you for joining us today. This episode was brought to you by ARC Silver Gold Osmium. For all your precious metals needs, head to arcsgo.com and contact owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.